and faithful ministry in this time. We're welcoming Jeff Tiemann, the CEO at Portico, and Terry Endries, who works with Jeff and with our region and from Portico. They'll have some words for us today, and they're really curious just to hear from you how things are going and how they can be helpful in their mission at Portico to serve you. We will be using a tool that was developed some really generative conversation with our presidents last evening around spiritual and emotional responses in disaster that I think will be a helpful way for them to hear from us. So I'm going to turn it over real briefly to Chris, who will give us our agenda and any other tips and tools around Zoom, and then we'll have a brief devotion.
Hello, everyone. I do record these meetings and put them up on our Synod resource page for those people who cannot attend at this time because of other things. And so please, unless you're planning on speaking, which there should be time at the end for some live speaking, please keep your computer and audio muted, and that will help aid in our recording. I will be monitoring our chat, and so if you have questions, you can direct them to me, Chris Dernier, or just put them in everyone, and I'll make sure those get tended to and not forgotten and not missed. A couple of things on our agenda today, and I want to share with you are on our COVID-19 resource page. The very top thing is our Synod Resilient Community Grant application. The first round will be looked at this afternoon. And so thank you for everyone who's applied, and still take the time to apply. It will be a great resource, and I'm really looking forward to hearing how congregations and communities are using it to facilitate their ministry in their congregation and in their communities. Up here, the ELCA Federal Credit Union is now accepting Paycheck Protection Program loans. We lifted this up last night with our council presidents. So if your congregation hasn't applied or hit some roadblocks along the way, give that a check, or have your council or your treasurer take care of that, pass that information on to them. You should have gotten a letter, an email yesterday from Bishop Bill, and it is also here on the webpage, and we'll go over that a little bit later after we have some guest speakers talk. It's also Give at Home Minnesota, and our we are participating in that as a synod, and half of the money raised will go towards those community resilient grants, and we're doing some challenges. And so if you are able, we would appreciate and be very grateful for a donation to help the ministry happening here in the synod and in your guys' congregations. Here's a video, and it has all the synod staff on it. I invite you to look at that. Yeah, anything else about that, Bishop Bill, before we move on?
I don't think so. Thank you, Chris. I'm going to share a devotion. Now, let's not have anyone envying my fancy reading glasses here. I know covetousness is a sin, so be careful. I've been utilizing various devotional resources, like I know many of you have, and this is an old one. I received this on my first deployment overseas back in 2006. It's called Strength for Service, and it was actually originally published back in World War II. And the language will sound very World War 1940s. But it's a really great little devotion, and I found this resonant. This is actually from yesterday's devotion for May 4th. And so the text is from Luke, from Simeon's song, "The day spring from on high shall visit us." Or you may know that quote as, "The light from on high shall dawn upon us." Luke tells us in poetic language that God promises us the dawn of a more cheerful world. There is a physical dawn and there is a spiritual dawn. Shakespeare says, "Night's candles are burnt out and jocund day stands tiptoe on the misty mountaintops." A Hebrew prophet foresees that God will win and justice triumph at the rising of the sun of righteousness with healing in its rays. In gloomy, world-shaking periods, Christians look forward to the dawn of a brighter age. An earlier Christian leader said of Jesus, "He has changed sunset into sunrise." A person of modern faith affirms, "God's day ends in dawn. It is high time that we recover the assurance of religion that night never speaks the last word and that dawn is irresistible." Civilians and members of the armed forces and rostered ministers, through their devotion, courage, and vision, can earn the honored title, Bringers of the Dawn. So it's good to be here with you today, Bringers of the Dawn. Let us pray. O God, who canst change darkness into radiance, grant unto us companionship with Christ and with all the dawn bringers through the ages. In duty, in danger, in human relationships, and in quiet moments, empower our comrades and ourselves to see thy light of truth and goodness. Establish in us sure vision and unfading faith. In the name of Christ, our leader, the dawn which comes from on high. Amen. Okay, I want to quickly jump into that, those two letters, Chris. Let's go with the first one, the one that I sent out already. Sorry, I should have given you a little more heads up. Caught you in the middle of watching cat videos, didn't I?
I'm more of a dog person, but here.
All right, so this went out, folks, and so the main purpose in this letter was to be a precursor to the guidance that will come out regarding reopening. And my main goal with this letter was to tamp down some expectations and to try to deal with some of the pressure that I know you and I also heard from presidents, leaders, councils are receiving to move quickly toward reopening. My basic message is there in the highlights. The truth is that here in Minnesota, we are not almost ready to return to gathering and worship again the way we did before March 14th. And so I've tried to frame this, that we do this based on our values and on our faith, and talk about the reality of the risks. I know that there are some people that just simply don't believe that the risks are real. And there are even those, and they are quite vocal in many of our communities, who think that it's kind of a hoax. And so I wanted to address that. We looked at this graphic that the governors provided in order to convey that it's a dial that can go forwards and backwards, and we're somewhere about halfway through that dial, not at the beginning of it. And then another reality, which is going to be one we talk quite a bit about as we move forward, which is that as communities of faith, we're going to move through this time quite differently. We all went into it together. It took 2 weeks for us to go from no restrictions to lockdown or to stay safe at home. But size and demographics and sort of just the reality of how whether there's an outbreak in your local community will all guide how we come back into worship. And those will be addressed in the guidance that's coming out. So I'll entertain questions around this offline. Do not hesitate to reach out or let me know what would be more helpful. So that's what this is here for. Chris, can you put up that draft of the guidance? guidelines. So a couple of things I'll say about that while we're waiting for the draft to come up is you'll notice that in a lot of my guidance, I've been referencing Governor Walz and the Minnesota Department of Health. In the guidelines for reopening, we're referencing the CDC and the White House and President Trump by name. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is the Minnesota faith community specific guidelines aren't out yet. They will be soon, but they're not out yet. But whatever they are, they're going to be consistent with those guidelines. In addition to that, we know that there is just a critical mass of folks, and there are people from whom you may be feeling a lot of pressure. Are you able to get that up there, Chris? I haven't seen it yet. I think you'll have to stop sharing and then restart it. There are just a group of folks that are disinclined to believe any guidance unless it's coming from President Trump. So in this particular guidance, I have mentioned President Trump by name and the White House and CDC guidelines. I'm not going to go into this because this is a detailed document, but if you could scroll down, Chris, to near the end, when we talk about, there's a FAQs. Okay, right there. A little bit up a little further. What happened to my FAQs? Maybe they're down there a little farther, sorry. I think they're down toward the end. I apologize. Well, anyway, so when we get to the FAQs, we're going to talk about, I might have accidentally deleted them before I sent this draft over, so I'll send Chris, I'll send you a better draft. But when we get to the FAQs, we talk about the reality of how, well, a variety of things, but I mean, like, what about small gatherings of people in the high risk categories? I want to address in particular, and I want us to have a conversation together about rostered ministers who are in the high risk category and what that means as we go through phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 of regathering. And so we're going to set up a separate meeting later this week just to discuss that matter, because I don't want to produce any feedback that doesn't have any guidance that doesn't have your feedback. So that was the main thing that I wanted to hit on with that. And Chris, I apologize for sending you a messed up document. So I want to turn it over now to Jeff and to Terry. Thank you for being here with us today. We're grateful for your work, and we're glad that you're able to take some time and be with us. So I'll just turn it over to whichever one of you is going to go first.
Well, great. Well, I want to thank you. One of the goals that we have is really to listen. Well, we got a little bit of info to share as well, but and I know that you've got conversations coming up, so that might be, as you said, our best way to hear perspectives. It's really good to hear, what's going on, what's on your mind, and kind of in general, things that you think leadership at Portico ought to know as we're making plans and setting priorities. I know that Terry has a little bit of an update for you. Why don't we start with that, and then maybe we'll have some time for some questions that you have about Portico.
Thanks, Jeff. I'm going to pull up a PowerPoint here and take over the screen. Can everybody see that? Great, thanks, Chris. So I'll just. Oh, just gotta. I'm learning this, so pay attention, or just give me 1 second. There's a way for me to switch the display. There we go. Okay, got it. Well, thank you so much. I am your regional rep, Terry Endries. I'm on this phone from Eden Prairie, Minnesota on this call. And I thanks Bill again for the invitation to be with all of you today. What I'm going to be doing is going through some of the benefits that Portico has on both the health plan and with financial well-being that all of you can access in this time. Some of these were added in January, some we've had, and we'll bring them up to date, bring you up to date on them. So one that we added in January is 98.6. So beginning this year, we have text-based primary care option. It makes connecting with a physician as simple as sending a text, access care any time of day and anywhere, no appointments necessary. You can use 98.6 doctors for the full spectrum of primary care medicine without leaving your home. Board certified US physicians will answer questions, diagnose and treat acute and chronic illnesses, outline care options, order any necessary prescriptions or lab tests, and more. I have a video link that I sent to the bishop with a PDF of this PowerPoint and a video to introduce you to 98.6. So I invite you to take a moment to look at it. I just used 98.6 the other day. I was bit by a deer tick up in northern Minnesota, and they were fantastic. So I've only heard positive things about 98.6.
We're going to send that out to everybody via email, Terry.
Thank you. And then we also have Doctor on Demand, which is another video online service that we've had for a while. One of the differences between 98.6 and Doctor on Demand, 98.6 does not have mental health, whereas Doctor on Demand does. So that's just important to know. As of now, through June 15th, the co-pays for Doctor on Demand and for 98.6 are waived. And for 98.6, there's no copay if you are a Platinum or Gold Plus member. If you are Silver Plus or Bronze Plus on the health plan, it's only $5 per visit. But again, those are waived through mid-June.
Just quick update, newsflash, they're now waived until the end of 2021.
Oh, that's awesome. It's always good to have the president on the phone when there's new updates. So the next one I want to talk about is Learn to Live. This is our new mental health online tool. And with all that's going on these days that can cause depression, anxiety, insomnia, stress, it brings us to really the timeliness of this Learn to Live that we picked up, like I said, January 1st. Learn to Live programs offer effective tools to help you and your family understand how your mind works and change your behavior patterns to help you live your best life. And it's available at no cost to you when you need it, and you have access to it online for the programs 24/7. It utilizes cognitive behavioral therapy. If you have teenagers, anyone 13 plus can use it. And I really want to emphasize the confidentiality of all of these. Okay, that's really, really important. And nowadays, to be honest, with everything going on, if you want to jump into one of these, I would say stress, anxiety, and worry may be a great tool or one of the great learning areas that you may want to explore. And then also the reminder about the Employee Assistance Program. This is part of our health plan. And so just a reminder about that. The information is right here on the slide. Another important benefit that we've added this year is Being. It's Being Academy. It's an online, holistic, faith-based educational platform offering expert-led videos on a wide range of well-being skills. I know you probably don't want to have any more screen time, but I really, really encourage you to find new ways to look at this tool and find ways to use it. There's a mindfulness course, yoga, cooking, and more where you can explore it within your home and watch these with your family. And I also encourage you to, if you find things that you might be able to use them in your ministry. During Lent, our Lenten worship at Portico, we used videos from Being, and we had really positive feedback from our employees about it. There's a video link also in the email that the bishop will send to you on burnout. And those videos are all done by leaders within the ELCA, and you might even recognize some of them. And then a new podcast series, Beyond Normal. If you are into podcasts, I highly recommend this. I've listened to all 9 of them this last weekend, episodes so far. Beyond Normal is a podcast by The Big No, which is who we partner with for Being. They're half-hour long, really good information, and it's all focused on COVID-19 and how we cope during this time. And then if you are an ELCA Medicare primary health plan member, there are 2 benefits that I want to point out to you. One is the telemedicine for Humana, which is MD Live. You can find out more information by either calling Humana or go onto their website to activate it. Again, I've heard only positive things about this as well. And the other one is silver sneakers. As part of your benefits with the Medicare primary, you do get silver sneakers, and they have over 200 videos online that you can access. And if you are not a member of Silver Sneakers, not on our plan, Silver Sneakers also has both a YouTube channel and a Facebook page, and those videos you can access for free. And if you're a plan member, none of that, this is free for us if you are a Medicare primary, sorry. And then we want to talk, just to remind you about the financial resources we have for all of you. We have our in-house financial planners. They're at no additional cost to you. Any of you have access to them. All you have to do is call the 800 number that you have on this slide. If you are an ELCA primary plan member, you can also earn 100 wellness dollars by meeting with one of our financial planners online. Or if you would happen to be in Minneapolis, you can certainly meet with them in person, but not at current time. We're not doing that. And then LSS Financial Counseling, we partner with LSS in order to do financial counseling for our leaders. You can have up to 6 confidential sessions with them per year. This extends to any member of your household. And I did check the other day with Cherish Holland, who runs this program for LSS of Minnesota. If you have an adult child who is not living with you but needs this help, you can certainly have them reach out as well through your benefits. And then just a reminder about the COVID-19 health coverage and assistance. We have a COVID-19 resource page on My Portico, and you can't miss it because when you sign in, this is what you'll see. And the ELCA for both primary health and Medicare primary, 100% of testing and treatment is covered, meaning it will not be applied to your deductible. It will all be covered. And then here's my contact information and our customer care center. Please reach out anytime. We would be happy to hear from you and answer any questions that you may have. And that's it.
Thank you, Terry.
So let me just start. I'd like to answer questions you have, and just to get the ball rolling, we've got kind of like the top 5 questions that were asked. The first one is, what's up with benefits, and Terry just updated you with that. But one of the questions that we've been asked is what are the priorities of the leadership at Portico right now? And I have been talking a lot about supporting the whole ecosystem. So I really go back to the vision statement that Portico has, which is enhancing lives, strengthening ministry, together for life. And that really speaks to our role of supporting all of you and supporting this great ecosystem of the whole church. I would divide our response to the situation into 3 timeframes. The first was the immediate, which seems so long ago, the transition from working in the office to working remotely. we actually, after the SARS outbreak in the early 2000s, we developed a pandemic response plan. And you know how sometimes, you know, you wonder if you ever pull that book off the shelf. Well, we did pull the book off the shelf, excuse me, and it has proven to be very valuable. The other thing is that, you know, 2 years ago, I remember that Minnesota hosted the Super Bowl, and some of the festivities were right on the street, right next to Portico. So we actually took the day before, the 2 days before the Super Bowl, that Thursday and Friday, and we closed the office. We didn't stop working, but what we said was that we're going to put in place our business continuity plan. So act as if the building is, you know, burned down or whatever, it's inaccessible, and do everything from home. And we actually did not even announce to all of you that we were doing that, and nobody noticed. So we didn't do it perfectly, but we did it well, and then we learned some things. And then over the last 2 years, we've been improving those things, doing a lot of tabletop exercises. So first priority was to get everything transitioned. I can tell you that things are working really well. Our response time is well under our maximum target. We're typically answering the phone in less than 20 seconds, and we keep stats on everything. So that's all working well. The second step was then responding specifically to COVID-19. We've done a lot of communication. We're trying to keep things updated with the information that Terry just sent you as an example of that. And we've had to make some plan changes. So the COVID-19 testing and the treatment, you know, making that 100% paid for by the plan. So we got those, you know, going. And then the third area is kind of a little bit, you know, longer term, is what about our projects? We have a number of strategic projects, and I'm happy that everything is on track. We're working on enhancing our benefits. We plan to roll some new things out at the end of this year, just like we did. And that's really exciting. All of our projects are on track, they're on schedule, except for our business development goals. We've actually been growing for the last 2 years. We have added many new plan members, because what we have said is that we need to serve the entire church. And that means the congregational ministries, the social ministry organizations, and then the higher ed ministries. We have been growing most rapidly in the social ministry organizations, and we are working with, to add some or all, eventually, of the 26 ELCA colleges and universities to the denomination plan. But right now, all of those activities with the social ministry organizations and the colleges and universities, not surprisingly, have really come to a halt because they are completely preoccupied now with their own response to the COVID-19 situation. So we're hoping that maybe later in the summer that will come back. But I thought, you know, it'd be good to know this is what we're thinking about, and we're still working to enhance the benefits so that they're even better and better next year. One of the other questions that I get asked is how is Portico's financial health? Because you want to make sure that the benefits are going to be around, we can pay the bills, and so far so good. We did come into the COVID situation with a good status of all of our trusts. Everything is paid out of trust. We have a medical trust. We've got, all of your retirement dollars are in trust. So those were all well funded. Obviously, we've seen the market go down, but we came into this well. We only have a small number of congregations that are that we're working with on payment plans now that are struggling with paying. We actually only had 4 new congregations come in March and April. I know that's early. We may see some more. So that's kind of leads to the next question, which is, what if any of your congregations are having a hard time and you're not able to make the payroll or the benefits payments? Please call us and let's talk that through and see how we can help and see where we can give you some flexibility. We do rely on all of the sponsoring employers putting money into the health plan. We pay out about $200 million in claims every year, medical claims. And that money basically, it comes in every year and then it goes out every year. So that's how we work, try to do that very, very efficiently. Let me pause there. I know we've just got like a minute left on the agenda. Is that right? Are there any other questions that any of you have that you would like to ask of us?
Well, and my hope, Jeff, is that you'll remain on the call, and as we walk through this conversation, I think there may be some touch points that make a lot of sense for you to touch base. But questions for Jeff or Terry, or comments? Okay. I'm going to move into this conversation here. So I've been, I came across this old resource. It's actually shared with me by one of our pastors, but it's something that we have used quite a bit in the military. And I have some experience in that role with working through disasters. One was a tornado that devastated an entire community in the state level there in South Dakota. Another was an airfield disaster that took place in a deployed location. And then I also, in my military role, I oversee chaplains who are engaging in domestic operations, which is usually hurricanes or floods. And we find this chart to be really true to form every time. And I think it has relevance for what we're moving through now. So along the horizontal axis, you have a function of time, and along the vertical axis is a function of emotional and spiritual well-being. So the higher you are, the greater your emotional and spiritual well-being is. And what you have here as you come into a potential disaster, you're sort of at a steady state along the left side here. And then the disaster happens, you have the initial impact, which for us was probably about, as I shared earlier, about 14 days. It took us about 14 days to go from no restrictions to complete shelter at home. And then you have actually, something interesting happens is that there's an initial adrenaline rush, and you actually achieve for a little while, a very short period of time, a higher level of well-being because everybody's engaged, everybody's all in, people's adrenaline is running and you're being creative. People are working together who maybe were formerly in conflict. And so we see that, and there's a lot of community cohesion initially, and that's what happens. Then you cascade down this cliff as you enter into the period of disillusionment. And you spend time working through grief. This is when politics begin to emerge. And there's this transitional time at the bottom of the cliff where people begin to recognize the work that's ahead. And then you'll notice that the way out is less steep, and it has its ups and downs, and it takes, whereas this is can be a few days to a few weeks. I would say this period of time here lasted a few weeks for us of energy and community cohesion. But then the reconstruction phases can be several years. And here in Minnesota, in this part of the world, maybe what we're most familiar with is the Red River flooding. And we know that in the worst years, that those communities, you'll notice on the right end of the graph, actually come out stronger than when you went in. But it takes a long time to get there. And I think that's been the experience as these communities along the Red River have recovered from flooding. So I thought it'd be helpful for us to just together, for you to take a look at this and just name where do you see yourself on this timeline right now? Or if you did, or where would you say we're at? And because we're looking at a graph together, you'll need to speak because it'll be hard to see the chats. It's usually not a problem asking preachers to speak.
David Fleener from Shalom in Alexandria.
Hi, David.
Hi. I think we have had wonderful community cohesion, and what I've heard is more sadness than anger or frustration yet. So it seems to me that we're nearing, at least in my congregation, we're nearing the top of this peak, this heroic peak. So thanks a lot. I'm bracing myself for what's coming next. So
Thank you for
Could
that.
I add, Wade Dutton at Cormorant?
Please.
I see the grieving happening off and on throughout that whole, that's very helpful diagram, but the grieving is, initial, and it's like the shock part of it, and then it continues throughout the whole thing. We were talking about the layers of grief today. I think we're already in that disillusionment part. I'm not talking about the staff, but some of the other things, what's the next step? What are we going to do now? Politics have started to emerge, which is a challenge. All that kind of, those kinds of things, where people are, all right, we've done this enough. We're not a very patient community and country in some ways. And so I think we're on that side of the curve at the moment. A lot of stuff working together. Cohesion is still relatively good, but we're still making that move.
Thank you for that. I'm seeing in the chat some people seeing politics emerging, and I've certainly heard that as the pressure to reopen comes, politics both intra-congregational or within the congregation and beyond are beginning to emerge.
This is Catherine Rothman. Have a similar kind of thing that I was taught when I was in graduate school, but it referred more towards the process of after a tornado or something, that you have the impact and then you have the period of sorting through what can be used in the new normal and what must be discarded, and that's part of the grieving process.
That's helpful, thank you. And there is a reflection, the guidance that we'll be producing will contain a reflection that actually invites you and your leaders to do just that, to sort of sort through what are some things that we'd like to keep that we've begun to practice during this time, and what are some things we practiced before we entered this time that maybe we never want to go back to again. So not that there would be a lot of those, but who knows? So what else?
Mark Olson here from Faith and Bagley, also on the northern edge of the White Earth Reservation, where our indigenous communities are particularly threatened. I'm concerned about even greater separation and finger pointing and some of the politics that's emerging. I'm grateful that our governor is talking about being inclusive, about opening up and referencing our indigenous communities, who seem to have even a greater threat posed by COVID-19. I think, and I've heard this in other circles too, that if our Native Americans or African Americans would have stormed the Capitol with guns, they would have been killed. They would have been attacked. And some of the racial vulnerabilities in our culture are really present now, and that scares me.
Thank you for naming that, Mark.
Can I piggyback on Mark's comment real quick? This is Sue Kesterman at Churches United.
Please, Sue.
It feels like in the midst of this, the fraying that's happened in our society and the safety net all the way across the board, the fraying was already there, the inequities were already there, but the crisis has thrown them into stark relief. And I think that's true of Indigenous people. It's true of persons of color. in our state and in the nation, and it's also true of people experiencing poverty and homelessness, of whom many are Indigenous or persons of color.
Thank you, Sue, and thanks for your continued work there at Churches United. I know that that's work's been made much harder by your inability now to have volunteers on site. And I know, Sue, you're asking for some help just in meal preparation by congregations and individuals. And what are some other ways that we can be helpful to you?
So we've really been impacted by volunteer groups not coming in. We have moved to distributing sack lunches here at Micah's Mission and at the Dorothy Day House, where people would normally be able to come into the building and receive a meal. And just to give you an idea of the scope, in a typical month, we distribute about 150 sack lunches. Between March 9th and April 1st, we distributed 900 sack lunches. And so we are in need of supplies for sack lunches. And if people have access to a commercial kitchen and are willing to prepare sandwiches for sack lunches and bring them to Micah's Mission, we can store them in an extra cooler that we've been able to purchase with some COVID funds, and then we can stuff sack lunches. But we're going through just an extraordinary number of sack lunches to be able to support our folks in the community who would normally be able to come into the buildings during community hours. The other thing that we need, if folks have access to a commercial kitchen, are trays of food that have been prepared that are oven ready, that can just be heated up in the oven either here at Micah's Mission or at the Dorothy Day House. Those are needed. Also, we have a number of people who are in isolation or quarantine at an off-site location because they've either tested COVID positive or they've been exposed to someone, close contact with someone who's COVID positive. And so we're having to bring them 3 meals a day plus a couple of snacks. And so sack lunches are needed there, as well as microwavable meals. Any of that would be helpful. Somebody can email us. We've had to hire some part-time staff members to make sure that our bench is deep enough to get us through this. When we started this, our analysis was that if we lost 25 to 30% of our workforce, either because they were COVID positive or were caring for someone who's COVID positive or had been advised to isolate, we'd have to close our doors. And so we've hired a number of temporary staff members. Everybody, including myself, has turned as much as possible to frontlines operations, just because we're sanitizing everything that doesn't move. We're making extra meals. We're not doing any self-service meals. So that means that even a cup of coffee has to be served from the kitchen as opposed to somebody being able to help themselves. So we need prayers, we need financial support. So far we're doing okay, but we are paddling for all we are worth. And we've had 3 COVID positive cases at Micah's Mission. We've had someone who has had close contact with someone who's COVID positive that was tested at the New Life Center in Fargo. There are at least a dozen people in the homeless community in Fargo who've tested positive, Fargo-Moorhead who've tested positive. And we will likely have a mass testing event at Micah's Mission either tomorrow or Thursday through the Minnesota Health Department. And, you know, we won't know what that shows until we know what shows. But I think it's important that it gets done. So at least we have a better sense of who we need to move off site. Right now, we're just shooting in the dark.
Well, thank you, Sue. And I would just say to the rest of you, you know, I mean, to engage in these in ministries like Churches United and the work that many of you are doing who live on or near White Earth or Red Lake, to partner and build relationships with our Native neighbors. It's important work in and of itself, but as we move into a time where, as we begin to cascade down this disillusionment cliff here, I would just say, just from a pure self-interest, it can be useful to have something other than your own problems to look at as a congregation, to be aware that there are folks that are struggling just to have a meal and to for basic daily needs. So I'd invite you to find ways, even in this time as a congregation, where you might be able to engage these ministries as God's people and as smart leaders. So what else do you see? Where do you see yourself on this timeline?
Hi, I'm Kevin Hackney from First Lutheran Middle River. Where we are, it seems like a lot of our leaders are in the cohesion still, but I see like 3, maybe 4 church members that are starting to not believe anything that is not coming from the president's Twitter. And so that means that they're not even believing the CDC anymore. And so I'm really worried. I'm really worried that unless we open up without restriction, that they're not going to be happy at all.
Well, and this is why in our guidance we're going to specifically mention President Trump's guidance, because that's what it is. It's I will just stop sharing here, and I'm going to just quickly go to a different share. I think I have it up. Yeah, here it is. So this is actually the White House's website. And this is President Trump's guidelines for opening up America again. And it's phased, slowly phased. You know, phase 1 begins after 14 consecutive days of declining positive tests or percentage of positive tests and declining symptoms. Phase 2 after 28 days and phase 3 after 42 days. It's a slow process, and it is the process that is actually endorsed by and pushed by the White House. So we'll try to emphasize that, and I invite you to foot stomp that in your own communities. So hopefully that's helpful. Anybody else? Where do you see yourself? And maybe as you think about this, what kinds of resources would be useful as you see our communities beginning to navigate this steep disillusionment curve?
Bill,
I see
Paul
Jeb
training.
Martin from.
Jeb, why don't you go first, and then
Okay.
Paul.
Jeff Monge from Malvik and Guthrie. And I see us in the adrenaline rush stage where I've done phoning. I can't figure out this Zoom business. So and my congregation is small enough that I can call them in a couple hours on Sunday morning. And there's an adrenaline rush with the contact and with the message but I think, you know, when I look in the future and see the different stages that are coming, I question whether or not we can stay in this stage very long. The length of time that they're talking about is 1.5 to 2 years, and I can't imagine being in an adrenaline rush that long. But we're not to the profound reactions to the event yet. The disillusionment, it's still time to go for that.
Thank you for that, Jeb. Yes, and one of the reasons I'm showing this to you is because I know a lot of us still feel like this we're in this phase of cohesion and adrenaline, and it won't last. I mean, there'll still be some people that are obviously able to function well with each other, and some cohesion will persist. But but we will enter a phase where we're all experiencing a lot of grief and we're struggling to adapt, and we're navigating widely very differing opinions.
Bill, this is Paul Trenny,
Hello,
and
Paul.
I see it that when we did Easter worship planning and put it on, everybody was thankful we had something.
Mhm.
Now with baccalaureate, we're getting questions, well, how do we include the quilters? How do we do this? How do we do this? And all of a sudden there's angst, and how do we make it like it always has been when we can't? So I see a change just in planning those two worships over the time. People's reaction has changed just a bit, or some people's reaction has changed a bit.
So now instead of just gratitude that we have anything, now there's a little bit more higher expectations.
Yeah, and how do we make it like it was when it's different?
Yeah.
So yes.
And I hope you're following the chat. There's some good questions being asked there. Pastor Hans Dahl down in Alexandria is asking, what's behind the rush to get back to normal? I think
that this is Catherine Rothman again.
Oh,
I think that there is some helpfulness to look back at our own church histories as we talk about going back to the way things used to be. Have a deep immigrant tradition where they left the old country and came here, and things were not like they used to be, and they had to adjust and adapt and change to the times when Sunday school was only held when kids weren't needed for farm work or in the wintertime. You just kind of went with the flow. So it's not like the past, and normal has always been the same. We are a church that adapts.
mm-hmm.
Helpful.
Yeah. And of course, we always experience the dislocation as abnormal, even though normal is the norm. That makes sense.
I find this is Linnea Papke-Larson from First in Bemidji, and I find this graph really helpful. I can remember feeling the threat and the warning, the adrenaline rush at the end of March, beginning of April, the community cohesion. I'm now seeing more politics emerging, and for a while now, and for a time to come, experience the deep grief work and grief that people are experiencing. But I'm also thinking that maybe instead of seeing the arrow kind of moving us ahead, I'm feeling like this may be better expressed in a spiral or a cycle, because we also know that it's going to be hitting us really hard in the next couple of months to come. And so that feeling of threat or warning is still really present. Like we're sort of holding our breath and waiting for what's next. So yeah, I think that the experience of not just moving through this one time, but that there might be a spiraling effect to this is what I'm thinking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I've been thinking about that too, Pastor Linnea. And I think if you look over here, there's the triggering events. It's not uncommon after disasters for there to be, like after an earthquake, there can, for several days and even weeks, there can be subsequent smaller earthquakes or even, worse ones. And they're not experienced as new disasters. They're experienced as part of the same disaster, but they trigger, they can cause you to back up along the timeline, and they can trigger, almost like a post-traumatic response. And I believe that's going to happen unless something extraordinary occurs, like a miracle or a vaccine or a treatment. Likely we will see another wave, and that will trigger a lot of the same emotions that we had as we were going in, and probably just here we go again, and a lot of weariness. So one of the resources we're pushing out is around post-traumatic stress and post-traumatic stress disorder that our Minister for Wellness, Pastor Aaron, Sumila Folkerts has produced. So you'll find that on our website. It's around post-trauma as it applies in this particular time. Lots of conversation right now in the chat session around how things won't go back to normal. Of course, that's true. Lots of things will be different. I think we will see. It's impossible to predict, but I think there will be some practices around how we're delivering worship and services that will continue. At least I hope they will into the future. There'll be lots of changes around lifestyle that we can anticipate that this will drive. But I would also say that family systems are very powerful forces, and the drive to achieve equilibrium will be very strong. And so there will come a time where we feel like we're at something that feels like normal again, although it'll be different than what came before. So I'm just going to stop sharing and just see it while we still have Jeff and Terry on the line. Any thoughts that emerged or questions, or Jeff or Terry, anything you want to add?
Yeah, this is Jeff. Well, one of the things that I've heard in some conversations, looking at your graph, was that there was a big push to Easter, and that, but then after Easter, it's okay, now let's get back, or let's have our rest time after Easter, and things like that. And so there was that pre-Easter and post-Easter, which just seems to coincide in our liturgical year with some of that graph as well. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons why we're doing so much communication and work on the emotional well-being that you heard Terry describe earlier is we really think that, from what we're hearing, that's really going to be important, and we're not going to see that demand peak for another 30 to 60 days. And as people realize that this is a marathon, not a sprint, and like was said earlier, you can't run a marathon on adrenaline, and that we're really going to need to take good care of ourselves and each other, and be supportive, because there will be conflict, there will be challenges. And the other thing I would say, I haven't heard so much talking in general is about expectations. I mean, there are those expectations of going back to normal, and we're having a lot of conversations at Portico, and I'm having conversations with other people across the whole church about let's talk about what the next version of normal, what our new reality looks like, and trying to get people to not go back to Egypt, if you will, right? Because we're just not going to go back to Egypt. We're going to go someplace different, and that ambiguity is really hard. And then the last thing I would say is the whole issue of grief. That even positive change includes grief, and I know I'm one that likes change, and I'm often the driver of change. But I also can sense that feeling among the folks around me, and myself too, that there is always some part of losing something when we change. And I just think about how we have all had experience, and have all been trained and have had profound impact on people in their lives, helping them deal with grief. And if we can tap into those skills and the work of the Holy Spirit to be the comforter, I think that we will do really, really well. I remember hearing early on when I was serving the parish that good pastoral skills will cover a lot of issues, right? I mean, you can mess up a lot of things if your pastoral skills are there. I'm not proposing that you all mess up a lot of things, but I just see this as a time where we might step even more into that, helping people go through that grief, because it's going to happen over and over and over. And everybody processes grief differently, but to name it, and I think will be really helpful. Now, those are some comments. I'm just one of the joys of this time is I get to be in meetings like this all across the country. And so I'm just passing on some of the wisdom that I heard elsewhere.
Thank you, Jeff. Well, we're coming to the end of our time, and I want to thank you once again for your amazing ministry. We see your creativity, and whether you're still in adrenaline phase or you're starting to shift into preparing for the marathon, we know that we're all in it in this race together. So thank you. I do believe that the text from Hebrews 12, so great a cloud of witnesses, that we have those saints of the past, both those in the Bible and the ones that pioneered this territory, who adapted and changed, cheering us on and right beside us as we move through this time, and we will come through it together. So thanks for your work in ministry. I'm looking in the middle of my screen here, and I'm seeing Pastor Mary Gilpin, and I'm wondering if she would be willing to offer a closing prayer for us. You're still muted, Mary.
I can't move my.
You got it now.
Can you? Okay.
There you go. Oh, now it went off again. Just click it once and there you go.
Okay, here we go. Let us pray. Lord, we thank you for these times that we've been able to be together with the Synod staff and with one another, and now also individuals from Portico. We thank you for all the homework that's being done and supporting us as rostered leaders. Now we commit to you all that we've learned today. Thank you for your encouragement and guidance. And I pray for each person that's in this Zoom meeting, that they would be encouraged by you and your spirit, and know that our hope is built on nothing less than you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thanks, everyone, and thanks, Jeff and Terry. We are going to schedule another meeting sometime this week to just go over the guidelines, to just get feedback, and especially around the role of rostered ministers who may be, for whatever reason, in a vulnerable individuals in the high-risk category. So you can watch for that. In the meantime, God's peace, everybody. Take care.
You too.